All right. It's me, your Astro Weatherman, Robert Phoenix, and I am back for another day of the Astro Weather. What's happening, everybody? We got the cosmic death fog here this morning. It's kind of a dark and damp and dystopic. That's how I describe today's weather. We're on at least out there, and I can see it. I can see it from this room filled with glass on the other side of this camera. Yes, there it is. How are you? What's happening with everyone? We are definitely in Pisces season. We are here, and we're going to talk about it. But today is Tuesday is Soylent Green Day. Speaking of dystopic, right on cue there, Mr. Seegard. When I was a kid, I was a huge fan of the dystopic movie. They were my favorite. I loved the end of the world shit and post end of the world shit. And every now and then there would be a comic book that would be sort of dystopic. That was my go-to read if there was one. I don't know why. I'll blame it on Scorpio rising. DJ Pebblestone excited for weather today. Well, what's up, Lotta? Scott Jerzik in the house. Buongiorno, Mr. Scott and Jackie Delario. A lovely day in South Jersey under the beneficent rule of Governor Phil Murphy. How about that? Oh, yeah. Man of the people, that Phil Murphy. Bill Brockman, upside down playing. I don't believe it matches our upside down world. The upside down plane. Yeah, right. Completely inverted. Great pickup there, Bill, in the symbolism. Hammer time. The snow is gone. In Miami or Florida, the snow is not gone. We have, again, talking about upside down, 45 degrees in Alaska right now and snow on the ground in Florida. We got a little inversion called an inversion front or the inversion effect, which is what happens in the Bay Area when they get natural fog, not the cosmic death fog. Christina Jerzik is here, and a little frozen tundra in that part of the world. Darlene, you have a great day. And we'll catch you on the flip side for the replay. Liddy Lou. Yeah, Burr incoming. I'm going to throw this up here. Pluto and Aquarius doing a number on accidental. Lucky no one died in that Delta plane turnover. How does that happen? How does a fucking plane turn over and people not die? I mean, this is an incredible mystery. But yeah, Pluto and Aquarius, death in the skies. The sky, of course, is Aquarius, and Pluto does, of course, represent death. There are some people who believe that this is all a ploy to keep the plebes from flying. That international air travel, and perhaps even domestic air travel, is over. Well, I guess we're just going to all have to learn how to astral project so we don't need these metal bodies around us, so we just go wherever we want in the multiverse. Helion Heart Rosie, stuck your work. All right, make the best of it. We'll do our best on this end. Lena Winkler, it is cold. We good fire going. Well, that sounds delightful. Artist Seer, time to wake up and move forward. I used to all love that. But a Spank is in house. Laura E. from the Arctic Tundra, not really just Vermont. Having a great snow winter, freezing cold 4 degrees. Wow. But the sun is shining and the birds are out. And Eric Adams is defiantly sticking his middle finger up at the Democratic Party as he is now Trump's boots on the grounds. Oh my, how the worm has turned. I saw this earlier. This is an interesting comment. There's a timeline where Tracy Twyman was a fictional character in True Detective season 1, right? There is a story in there about Tracy Twyman. The problem is that her husband, widowed husband, is such a freak about making sure that nobody can access her content or use her name or anything, that almost any mention of Tracy Twyman gets a cease and desist. I kid you not. In fact, I have one over on my YouTube channel, and unless I go through their little fucking copyright school, which I refuse to do, I will continue to have a check, a community guidelines check. So that's how granular the control over her name, image, and likeness is. Here's our guy Neil checking in from the Great White North Kabuki Theater. Hello, Bo, the lovely and talented one. Saving an Austin one tooth at a time. Barbara Boots, yes, it's cold again. And we're going to get our little share of it here. Kind of at the bottom of the hill country. Integrity and Karma checking in. Look at that. But that. Let's see. Janine. Hi, Janine. Good to see you. Lisa Ann White. The Law. Finca, Felice, Elizabeth have Mars parked on a planet for weeks. For me, do you have some words for those of us who have Mars? Yeah, it's called endure. Endure in order to evolve. It's actually 3 words, not just one. What else are you going to do? You have to hunker down. And if Mars is on your sun, I think the best thing you could ask yourself is, how are you using your energies? Right? Are you using your energies in a way, personally with the sun now, are you using your energies in a way that is supportive to who you are? Because that Mars is getting you to rethink, how you're expending the energy to support your identity. It's pretty simple, right? And Lynn, I know that you take great care of yourself, so you're probably not going to have to do a bit of an audit there, right? But it's also around, if we're really digging into, Mars and Cancer. When we get into Mars represents anger, right? Mars represents the ability to activate the will, right? Mars is conflict. So perhaps Mars is getting you to re-examine where you're putting your energy in those areas of your life. And maybe there could be a different expression or a redirection of that energy. If you have, say, Mars on Mercury at 17 degrees, right, it's going to affect your thinking. And that's a very different kind of equation, right? Because there's a couple of Marses in the zodiac that can be passive aggressive. Mars in Cancer is one of them. The other 2 are Mars in Pisces and Mars in Libra. Now, what does Mars in Libra and Mars in Cancer have in common? Well, if you look at them, they're both trying to balance something, right? Mars in Libra is trying to balance the scales in whatever endeavor it's, engaged in, right? It's trying to achieve some degree of balance, but it's very difficult with Mars in Libra to do that. There's either an aggressive posture, or once the individual has been too aggressive, then they kind of go to the other side of the scale and they're not as aggressive anymore. And then when they're not as aggressive, it's not that fun, right? It's like, oh, now I've got to sit here and take it, right? So then they go back to the other side and they're aggressive again. So there's this kind of weird balancing going on with Mars and Libra, which can be a little passive aggressive. The same thing happens in Cancer. If you look at Cancer and the glyph of Cancer, you basically have the yin and the yang. That's the masculine and the feminine, right? And what is Cancer attempting to do? Achieve balance between both of those on an emotional level. Now, Libra is attempting to achieve balance on a mental level, right? So they're quite different. They're similar, but they're different. So when you have Mars conjuncting Mercury in your chart, It's about how you're processing this entire experience through your brain. And I think of all the Marses, that one could be the one that could fry you the most, because there could be a real sense of, for lack of a better term, of impotence, or a sense of lacking direction, or frustrated over the direction that one's life has taken, right? So there's a lot of rewiring going on during that. And we can just go through every planet, but we probably won't. I think those two are kind of critical. The Mars-Venus conjunction, if Mars is on your Venus for a while, of course, you're having to deal with relationships and things you've agreed to, and you may not be agreeing to those things anymore. But because Cancer has, again, this passive aggressive element to it, it can be very hard to move forward and sever the ties that bind, or find your own passion and your own direction inside of a relationship, and not make it dependent upon the other person that you're with. Right? So there you go. There's a few examples. Devin Dewar in the house. I'll be with Devin this week on her show. If you haven't checked out her channel, check it out. It's Devin Dewar, just like it's spelled. And I guess I'm going to be talking astrological angels. I guess we'll look at the zodiac, and we'll kind of dive into what that looks like. Let's see, who else do we have here? Did I say hi to Orlando? You get a double hi, Orlando. Soul Travelers and Diane Evans checking in. Hi, Diane. Kelly B's back. Hi, Kelly B. Let's see, Sharon Lewis, Another Day in Paradise. Sandra D. There's my man Tom Jordan. What's up, Tom? Hit the like. Yes, hit the like. Subscribe. Josie's Jazzy Junk, the Triple J, coming off a birthday. Is that right? Did we do that? We did that, didn't we? Liddy Lou has natal Mars, retrograde in Scorpio, inside job. Oh. If this were a blue broadcast, back in the day they had things called blue content. If this were a blue broadcast, I would say something quite blue about that, especially the inside job part. But it's early in the morning, and we're going to keep the algorithm clean. Lynette Jardine is here. There she is, Mad Maxine, my man Steve. Zero is immortal. He lurks and he works. Charlie checking in from Biloxi. Maybe it's the cosmic fog for Pisces season, but the vibe needs some heightening. I agree. Let's fluff it up. But we have that sun in Pisces and the moon in Scorpio. This is how we're kicking off Pisces season. It is not going to be your average Pisces season. Let's see. Garfield the cat was pretty dystopic to me. He was a grumbler, wasn't he? He was a total grumbler. Claire, what's happening? My Endless Road in the house as well. Tammy Lynn, Melissa Stanton from the FLA. Erica Emoti here. Lisa Osina, expecting snow in Jerusalem. Wow. That would be interesting. I think what we all would love for Jerusalem is peace on earth for all people. My Endless Soul, it's a balmy 9 degrees. Yes, you can become a member over there. Locals. I'm going to be spending some more time over on Locals. Brandy in a bikini at 42 in Apple Valley. Amy Gill is here. Oh my God, I guess I said to my mom and dad, I felt like a plane crash was coming. And hours later that day, I think the way that the planes are falling out, it's almost like closing your eyes and throwing a dart and you're going to hit. But that's not to take away from your psychic abilities, Claire. We're here to support that. Verbal report, plane landed on a building and flipped over. Okay, thanks, Charlie, for that clarification. Esperanza Venstro, naturally Mother Earth. It is really cold in the Minnesota morning. Gaia Travelog is here. Kanya Curtis, spoiling things for planes like they did with the airships. Yes, air travel. Going to be harder for the plebes. Lady Virgo in the house. Bonnie Lancy. Wow, look at that. Minus 14 in WO. Is that Western Oregon? Wow, that could be Western Oregon. Wyoming? Wisconsin. Thank you, Bonnie, for setting that record straight. Okay, I think we're about ready to go. Scrubbies is here. SL Sully's here. And I think we're ready to jump into the weather. This Mars has been squaring my Mars forever. That's got to be a little frustrating. Dead Wolf Resistance, 13. 2 more nights of 25 below. That's a 5-dog night. That is a 5 freaking dog night. Okay, I think we're ready. I think I got most everybody. All right, let's do this. Let's do this. Let's get into the weather. The weather. Talking about the weather. Okay, let's zoom in and let's share this bad boy. Let's share this bad boy. When I was young, 20 minus 20 degrees ain't nothing. I used to walk 10 miles to school. Minus 20 degrees, I didn't have any socks. You all have it too easy. There we go. Right here we go. We're kicking it off right there. It is Pisces season. You know what that means? We are nearing the end of the astrological year. Things are winding down, ticking and talking and slowing to a crawl. Well, I guess if it's a fish, what would we say? Slowing to I don't know. What do fish do when they slow down? They don't really swim, they float. Slowing to a float. It's been interesting watching all of these videos around sharks and people and orcas and people. I don't know if you guys have been catching this, but man, that energy, that Saturn and Pisces energy, it's like if you're out in the ocean, you better be aware of your surroundings. And even if you are, there are other entities out there that are aware of you, right? Okay, so let's get into this sun trine to the moon. I actually think it's very positive. You know, we've talked about this Scorpio moon before, and it's not the easiest of moons, right? Like sometimes it can invoke the green monster, which is also known as jealousy. Of all the moons, it's probably the most jealous moon because it feels intensely. And once it feels so intensely, it doesn't want to give up the thing that is bringing it, the feeling, which in most cases is probably ecstatic and pleasurable, which is what Scorpio is quite good at, right? So this is, I think, the setup for the moon in Scorpio. Now, sometimes it could also be triggered by lack, but usually it's more about the intensity of the feeling. Well, today we've got that moon Pluto square, and boy, oh boy, oh boy, is this an intense square. So emotions are not easy, right? There's no gray area here at all, none. It doesn't mean that the emotional expression is necessarily correct, right? But at this hard angle, it is very, very, especially during the early morning hours of the day. Later on, you know, once the moon starts to hit 10, 11 degrees, it comes off of that square. But right now, it's very, very intense. Very, very intense. Now, it's not irredeemable because we also have this trine going on with the sun and Mercury, right? So you can get hung up here. And this is, you know what this feels like to me? It feels like something that does get incredibly cold. So cold that when you bend it, it snaps. You know, like that liquid hydrogen cold. Because Pluto, Aquarius is cold. It's a cold motherfucking sign, right? And we've been in cold weather for a lot of this past month when the sun has been in Aquarius up here in the northern hemisphere. That's the way this thing rolls, right? And so we have a cold snap. and think of the word snap, right? And think of emotions snapping. They're not mutually exclusive here. But if you can go with the flow, right? If you can go with the flow and surrender a bit and understand that there may be a higher path here, you can avert this, but it's not, you're going to, when we get into the moon in Scorpio, we're not dealing with ego, maybe bruised ego, perhaps, right? But there's a major, major lesson in the air today, which is to let go, right? Let go and wait for the right time. Do not try to force things. Don't try to force things today. And don't allow yourself to be forced. That's the other side of this coin, right? Because when you get into this, this is coercion. This is hardcore emotional manipulation and blackmail. And don't let yourself become privy to that, right? Just go here, move in this direction. It's like, when you were a kid, when I was a kid, and you play with water, whether it's at the beach or wherever you're playing with water, and you fuck around with it, and you put things to obstruct the water in the way of the water. What happens? The water goes around it, right? This is what I'm talking about. It goes around the obstruction. So today, your best bet is to just go around the obstruction. And to, so we're in the throes of this intensity. And I think this is a signal for the rest of Pisces season, because we're starting off day one here. This is like the template for, in some ways, the rest of the season. So do you want to go through this Moon-Pluto square and deal with the hardcore intensity of the emotional expression, which is going to be at a hard angle, right? Or do you want to move into this direction and wait for a better time? I think that is really the antidote here. And Mercury trining the moon understands this. Mercury is driving the bus right now. It's ahead of the sun. So the idea here, even in sort of mystical, foggy Pisces, right? So we have Mr. Magoo driving the chariot, but nonetheless, it's Mercury first and the sun behind. So it's about gathering information. And Mercury in Pisces is just working on, some degree of intuition, some degree of, hearing voices in your brain. And sometimes those voices in your brain or your sleep might actually have something meaningful to tell you. I would not call this a logical and analytical Mercury, right? There's a lot of imagination that is hardwired into Mercury and Pisces. So you have to imagine. Like, an imagination is something that's been, I think, in a lot of ways, hijacked from our lives. And there's a positive expression of imagination. And that's imagining that you're headed in the right direction. It's I guess it would be akin to affirmation in some ways, right? Because when we get into Pisces, we get into this whole notion of faith, right? So you have to have faith in where you're going right now, even if it's a bit of blind faith or foggy or clouded faith. And you're bringing your deep, intense scorpionic emotion along for the ride, right? This is the flow right here. This is not the flow. Now, you may have to go through this in order to get here, right? But here is just a much better expression. And this is one of the things about astrology that's really important. that there's opportunities to have the hard lesson, there's opportunities to have the easy lesson. So having the easy lesson is listening to your intuition, right? The moon in Scorpio is connected to survival. It is deep and intense emotional survival. And if you link these two up, you'll be able to kind of navigate through this. And I think this is important. You really need to listen to your intuition. And I know it's crazy, right? But it's kind of like what Claire talked about in chat. If you feel like you shouldn't go somewhere, you should listen to that. Or if you feel like you should take a different route, listen to that. Especially today. Today's one of those days where listening to your inner sense of guidance and direction, I think is really important. Really important. Let's link up Mercury here with Mars. Now, Mercury's going to move closer and closer. Now we're in that 10-degree orb, and Mars is the chariot, right? So again, this has a lot to do with travel, physical travel, emotional travel, psychic travel. We're about 10 days out from Mars going direct, so we're going to hit that long station period, right? 10 days out, Mercury will be at 17 degrees and will be in an exact trine with Mars. So for all you people that have been hung up with Mars here, hanging around your whatever planet you have, roughly from 13 to 20 degrees, right, that you're going to have a green light. So the green light is coming in a big way, because when you link these two up, Mercury represents travel, Mars is the chariot. It's like, okay, we can move forward now. In that time, everything is going to be in front of the sun. That's one of those periods. Pluto will be behind, but the moon, right? The moon will be out here, right? The sun will be out here. Saturn, they're all visible in the sky. And Mars is direct. Jupiter is direct. Uranus is direct. Everything is direct just before Venus goes retrograde. There you go. How about that? What else do we have here? We've got Saturn squaring Jupiter. That's been going on for a while. That's all about money, spending where you need to, saving where you have to. You can't go overboard. Do not go overboard. Now, eventually, we're going to have the sun come in and square Jupiter, which I think I talked about that on Sunday night. It's a very delusional time. It's a very, very delusional time. And I think people are becoming more and more aware that we live in two separate realities. And I think it's going to get even stranger. And I think one of the things that people are starting to wake up to is that the so-called elites have a very different kind of life. And they have a different kind of life in ways that we don't even really comprehend. And the closest thing that I can draw like a parallel to is the movie They Live. And if you've seen They Live, you understand that this quote unquote alien species masquerading as humans, which is a theme that we're probably going to hear more about as well, is that they have a completely different relationship with physical reality. They're able to blink in and out of physical reality. They have like these underground passages. They have this whole kind of network set up in a lot of ways. And it reminds me of this story that broke on the internet probably about 4 or 5 months ago, maybe 6 months ago. And it was this guy who was this whistleblower. And what he did is he worked at a Starbucks that was on what I guess you would call it like a parkway or a freeway beneath Los Angeles, right? So there's this whole system set up beneath the city of Los Angeles where celebrities do not have to travel on the congested LA freeways. And he said they even have a Starbucks down there where they can stop and they can get coffee, snacks. And he talked about the people that are down there. He mentions Jerry Seinfeld. And what's interesting is that Jerry Seinfeld did a show, I think maybe last year. And the concept of the show was almost like it was selling this idea that Jerry Seinfeld actually drove on the streets of Los Angeles. And so what he would do is he would pick somebody up like Kramer or Steve Martin or Larry David or whomever in one of his myriad of cars, and they would drive around and they would talk and they would go somewhere and they would have lunch, right? That was the premise of the show. And it almost felt like he's going to do this show just to tell people or remind people that he has to travel on the streets of Los Angeles just like everybody else, right? So this is where I'm going with this is as the sun moves closer into this square with Jupiter, we're at this time now where these transits are going to be very different than they were a year ago or 2 years ago. Right? So the last time Jupiter was in Gemini, roll the clock back, it was what, 2011, 2024, so 2010, right? 2012. 2012 was the last time Jupiter was in Gemini. And so the last time the sun in Pisces was squaring Jupiter in Gemini, it was a different kind of square because environmentally, socially, things change. Right? This is not the same world that it was in 2012. Right? So we had our own version of these, because Pisces is related to duality. I mean, look at the sign. What separates Pisces from Gemini? Gemini is self-contained duality, and Pisces is duality with kind of this open frame set on the top and in the middle, but it is still duality, right? This is a fish and it's swimming one way. This is a fish and it's swimming the other way. So these two signs are very connected to this idea of duality. And so we have the sun moving in closer, even Mercury coming in here. This is going to be part of, the meta, and beginning to realize that we live in a world that is not what it seems. And there are versions of the world in this physical domain that are available to other people that are not available to others. It's kind of, it's kind of a peek into the veil a little bit. And some of these claims might be very extraordinary. So stay attuned to that. And it's like, wow, this is really bizarre. Okay, so we have that. All right. What else is happening? I do think with Saturn trining Mars, even with the retrograde, we have the ability to deal with some degree of manageable work with this Mars Saturn trine, even though it is retrograde. I do think it's hard to work, though, a lot of long hours with Mars and Cancer. It's not a sign built for, it's not like Mars and Capricorn, where you just fucking work forever. Mars and Cancer gets very tired if it works too long. However, being buttressed by Saturn, it's not a bad thing, right? So was yesterday, I finally got a hold of the septic guy, and he's supposed to come out next week and begin this process. And I'm hoping that we can start it on what day? The 28th. I don't want them digging in my backyard with Mars retrograde. Right? I'm not down with that program. So if you are working on some major household projects, I think it's good to line them up. I think it's good to get your ducks in a row. But if you can just hold off for another 10 days, then it's going to be much more effective. Because with a retrograde, you may have to go in and redo certain. Now, they're going to start this process, and it's okay, right? The city's going to come out here, and they're going to look at the backyard, and what are they going to do? They are going to review the plans, right? So when you get into a retrograde, things like reviewing aren't a bad thing. So that's just for me personally. You're going to have your own version of this. Yeah, we're going to have Venus going retrograde here soon. I'll probably talk more about that tomorrow. And right now, it's starting to move into square with Mars, and that's fiery. That is a fiery, fiery square. And again, it's, kind of born out of frustration. We don't have a lot of Earth right now. We've got Uranus, and then we have the South Node and the vertex. It's not a lot of Earth. There's not a lot of terra firma to stand on. And that's kind of a model for where things go once Uranus goes into Gemini. It's like goodbye, Earth. We're not going to get any Earth until we go through 2 Jupiter cycles. And Jupiter goes from Cancer to Leo to Virgo. And Jupiter in some ways is an inner planet. To me, Saturn is the bridge between the inner planets and the outer planets. So from 2026 to 2029, there's no Earth, with the exception of one Jupiter transit through Virgo. And that's not even very stable Earth. That's mercurial Earth. So we are in an interesting part of the universe, aren't we? Oh, look, there's a cat in the backyard. There's that cat. Funny. He's like, I'm going to come by that place. Maybe that cat's going to be in that sunroom. Usually when that happens, the cat in question, Peachy's not there. All right, let's talk a little True Hemp Science. And the star of the day. All right. So your True Hemp Science star of the day is none other than Matt Dillon. And of course, True Hemp Science is your one-stop shop for all things CBD. Now, if you spend $100 or more and you type in 15MINS, you will get the goodie bag. And the goodie bag is like your Whitman sampler inside of your order. I guarantee you'll dig it. You'll get some nice little bonus treats in there. And it's kind of like opening your stocking on Christmas. $150 or more gets you free shipping. There's always a 30-day money-back guarantee, and you can always reach out to True Hemp Science, make an appointment, and talk to Chris or somebody who's there, and they can help you get more clarity on what will work for you. So that's truehempscience.com. All right, let's talk Matt Dillon. I could have gone in a couple different directions today. Today's John Travolta's birthday. And what's interesting about Travolta and Dillon is, give me 1 second, I'm just going to get a little sip of my Coca-Cola, my Zevia, is that both Matt Dillon and John Travolta make their presence known to us as rebellious youth. Okay? So if you look at John Travolta, what's the most rebellious kind of expression of John Travolta? Well, it's Vinnie Barbarino, a member of the Sweat Hogs, on Welcome Back, Kotter, based on, of course, what's his name? Gabe Kaplan's high school experiences. That's what that show was based on. Those characters were characters he knew growing up, right? And so that's what the show was based on. But he's Vinnie Barbarino, right? He's got the leather jacket and he's cool. And of course, that extends into Saturday Night Fever, where he is rebellious. He just doesn't want to be working in no paint store. He's got to dance. He's got a future. And it's probably the most, I would say, impactful sort of Rebel Without a Cause movie since Rebel Without a Cause. I mean, John Travolta portrays a very powerful image of youth and bravado and, in his own way, bucking the system. Matt Dillon does the same thing. Now, Matt Dillon's first movie is called Over the Edge, which I actually saw a long time ago on HBO. It was back in the day when HBO was almost purely movies. And it was a small independent film and it was, I believe, shot in Arizona, and it was about a group of teenagers who were rebellious and kind of out of control. And Matt Dillon was the leader of the pack. How did Matt Dillon get that role? Well, the producers of the movie were actually in New York looking for talent. And Matt Dillon had gotten kicked out of class at his high school in New Rochelle. And they were the producers of the show were actually cruising that campus looking for talent, and they find him. And he is looking like a childhood delinquent. Let's take a look at teenage Matt Dillon. Teenage Matt Dillon looked the part. So this is what they were casting, right? They were casting this guy, with his wiseacre, look, right? They're casting this guy right here. Matt Dillon, he was the part, right? He was the part. And that extends into some other movies. I guess his next movie after that was Little Darlings, and he plays the boy from the bad side of town. And Jodie Foster, who's in Little Darlings, winds up losing her virginity to the bad boy, Matt Dillon. And then we go into My Bodyguard, which is actually a very good movie. And he plays what? A thug bully at school. And he is, making life hell for Chris Makepeace, which I think is ironic because he's in this role and he doesn't want to fight Matt Dillon, and his last name is Makepeace. Anyway, but that's how Dillon cuts his teeth, right? He's rebellious. So he has Mercury on his ascendant in Aquarius, Saturn in Aquarius, Mars in Aquarius, Sun in Aquarius. And he is definitely cut from the rebellious cloth. He goes into the 3 S.E. Hinton movies, Tex, The Outsiders, Rumblefish. He basically is playing a version of the same character. All through those movies, from the start of his career, he is playing a young, rebellious youth. Right? That's what he's doing. Now, that fits. That fits. Sun-Mars conjunction in Aquarius, kind of Kazimi'd, right? He becomes known for this. He becomes known for his, sort of rebellious roles. But then what happens with Matt Dillon is very interesting, is he begins to play different kinds of roles. And he starts to, show his comedic flair in playing against his character and his type. He starts to play some goofy ass characters. So he's not just this, kind of smoldering teen hunk rebel. He begins to flip his own script, which with Aquarius, you would expect him to do. He also becomes known for narration, which is interesting with Mercury on the ascendant. I think he was big into Kerouac and did this kind of narration for this documentary on Kerouac. And he's done cartoon characters as well, right? So the voice of Matt Dillon has become, part of his, acting repertoire. Now, the thing that's always interested me about Matt Dillon is, why did he not become more popular? What, he had the makings to be, an A-list actor, but his career really hasn't gone that way. And now he's, 61 years old. Matt Dillon, 61 years old. And Keanu Reeves will be right there this year at 61. So a lot of these kind of, sort of brat packers, what I would call very, very early Gen Xers, very early. Kind of, but Matt Dillon's closer to like Generation Jones than he is Gen X. they're all moving into their 60s now. Sean Penn is my age, 65, right? He'll be 65 this year, right? So it's interesting. Like the bulk of his career, he may have a bit of a second act with that Sun Saturn conjunction. You may see a bit of a Matt Dillon renaissance, but he also has not really been all that. Like, there's not a lot of information about his domestic life and his family life. Not a lot. Of course, he's known for one of his brothers, Kevin, who is also an actor, right? So there's that Gemini coming from the fourth house in the family, Kevin Dillon, Matt Dillon. True Node is in Cancer. So theoretically, this guy should be having kids. I think he has one. But again, very, very secretive, right? There's not a lot. There's not a lot happening there. What's interesting about his father? His father is an interesting character, right? His father was a painter, and so he comes from an artistic family, and I believe his grandmother was the sister of the guy who penned the Flash Gordon comic strips. So Matt Dillon sort of was raised in a artistic family. So his father, I believe, drove a bus, like school buses during the day, but he was also a painter, and he was also the coach of the high school golf team. And we can get a bit of a taste here for Gemini in the fourth house, right? The patriarch of the family did a lot of different things. Had his hand in a lot of different areas. So I think that probably influenced Matt Dillon to have sort of an eclectic approach to living his own life. And maybe that has also colored his career a bit. He has Neptune in the ninth house, which I think is always interesting because Neptune is exalted in Sag, or here we have accidental exaltation. But he has some squares going on. And believe it or not, I'm going to chime in here that even though Matt Dillon doesn't seem to lack for confidence, based on this, I think that there are times in his career that he may have felt inadequate, or he may have felt like maybe even from like let's say a spiritual level, that he may have felt disconnected from the things that he was involved in. Now, maybe one of the reasons why he wasn't as big or as popular as some of the other people of his generation, like Robert Downey Jr., and it's not because of a lack of talent, but perhaps he didn't play the game, right? And that would be really congruent for all this Aquarius. He's going to kind of do it on his own. And is there a price to pay? Probably. Probably. He doesn't have a lot of water in his chart, which is interesting for somebody who's an actor, because you would think that, with water, you'd have to want to draw on these emotions. So I don't know if Matt Dillon is, two-dimensional, his emotional expression. And is that another reason why he didn't become more famous? I don't think so. Because there have been a lot of very wooden actors who have done quite well. And it has probably more to do with what they've agreed to do than what they can actually do. Venus and Jupiter, both in Aries, and both in the second house. The moon is there as well. Matt Dillon probably is doing just fine financially with those planets, especially the moon in Taurus right there in the second house. Whatever he's made, he's probably done well and invested in it. Right? He's got that moon trine Uranus, not necessarily trying Pluto, but Pluto comes along for the ride. So I think Matt Dillon, if I were to make a wild guess, that he's probably invested in property. Probably owns a couple of buildings somewhere. That's my sense. Again, I don't know that, but based on his chart, that's my sense. In terms of relationships, and again, when you read his bio, the only thing you see is that he was involved with Cameron Diaz at one point, and that's about it, right? So there's not a lot of traction there, and we have to take Pluto and Uranus into account in the seventh house. Not the most stable configuration for relationships. He wants some freedom. He wants some autonomy, and with Pluto here, when things get too intense, he's gone. He's out. Right? That's my sense. And everything's, here, the seventh house starts with Leo, and everything's kind of, passionate and loving and romantic. And then the gear shift. And the relationships, I think, go in a strange direction. And it's based on him. More than anything, it's based on him. So he's got an interesting chart, and it's really, for me, it's the personification of the rebel right here. Personification of, and he's still working, he's still doing movies and he's kind of moved into television more. He's in the television phase of his career. So there you go, your True Hemp Science star of the day, Matt Dillon. Not to be confused with James Arness and Matt Dillon over on Gunsmoke. All right. That does it for today's Astro Weather. Thank you all for being here. I wish you nothing but the most graceful execution of all your affairs today. And we'll be back here tomorrow at 8 o'clock Central Standard Time. And of course, we have another show coming up, 15 Minutes of Flame. And we're going to revisit the absolute mega blast that J.D. Vance set off in Europe and the attendant fallout as a result of that appearance. So we're going to get into that over on 15. The links are in the show notes. We go to Boxcast, you go to Rumble, you have your choice. So, hey, treat each other well. God bless. Much love to all of you. And we'll be back here tomorrow. Bye for now.